How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Infinite Sports. I'm your host, Kenneth Gruenfelder, to recap Week 15 in the NFL and another crazy week. Some injuries we're going to talk about. Some teams got eliminated from playoff contention that I wanted to get into and discuss. And some surprises. Talk about where certain teams are and, the confidence level that I may have in some going forward and things like that. So, one of the things I wanted to get into, we're going to start off right out of the gate talking about the Kansas City Chiefs. Because the Chiefs, we talked a little bit about it last week about the possibility of the Chiefs being eliminated from the postseason prior to the postseason, and it happened. The Chiefs ended up getting eliminated. They fell to the hands of the LA Chargers, losing 16-13. But not only that, but towards the end of the game, Chiefs are trying to drive down the field and potentially tie the game with a field goal and send the game to overtime. And as that was being put together, Patrick Mahomes ends up going down with a knee injury and gets helped off the field, helped back into the locker room. And it was later determined that Patrick Mahomes tore his ACL. And it's going to be a 9-month recovery, which could he potentially miss the start of next season? Yes, but he's doing everything he can to make sure that he is playing, he is starting week 1 for this team. And this basically marks the end of this point in time where the Chiefs, they've dominated the league. They've dominated the AFC. They've been in the AFC Championship game, every single year since 2018. And now they're going to be on the outside looking in this time. And this marks the end of what has been an incredible run for them. Now, that doesn't mean that they can't get back to this point or that point and try to win another championship and win more championships, because I do think that there are more championships in Patrick Mahomes' future. But there needs to be changes. There needs to be changes. You got an older team. There's going to be some guys that might not be back next year. Specifically Travis Kelce. We'll get into that in a little bit. But there definitely needs to be some tinkering, as we've been saying. And I think as long as they got Patrick Mahomes, they're always going to be a team that can be a threat. Now, there could be some down years, because maybe it's not a quick fix. I know I used the word tinkering. Because there are still good players on this team. It's not like the Chiefs are, the Raiders or the Titans. You gotta reload. Gotta inject some more youth into this team, and you got to get some more dynamic playmakers. I know I talked about the running back position. The other thing too is like I've been saying, I've said this before, with the offensive line, because that was a weakness for them even last year, but it's been a weakness this year. That's something that they have to correct, and I think you're going to need some players on defense too. Because Chris Jones is not getting any younger. I think you need to add somebody else there. So I don't think this team is just going to completely disappear. But they're going to need to make changes. They're going to have to add. And I think that in time, they will get themselves back up from this. And they're going to be a good team again. And Patrick Mahomes, prior to him getting hurt, and prior to this slide, which it was really, he just had no time to throw. Going up against these good defenses, the Texans, and then he had the Chargers, obviously, this past week. It was tough. It's tough to, get through all that. But then you could say, well, look at Justin Herbert, what he did with that offensive line going up against the Chiefs. The Chargers were still able to get the win. But, and I don't want to come off as making excuses, but those are good football teams that they were going up against, and the Chiefs are not the same team that they have been. you know. So, but Patrick Mahomes had a good year. I mean, I think he had one of his better. He was having one of his better seasons. It's just the Chiefs are kind of on the losing end of a lot of these games. Whereas last year, in these one-score games, I mean, I don't think they won a single one-score game this year. Almost every loss was pretty much every loss was, even including this past Sunday, one-score loss, and they were on the losing end of that. Whereas last year they were on the winning end. So you saw a complete flip. And I think you could tell early on in the season, the first couple of games that, yeah, this is not going to be the same. This is not going to be the same. Now, I didn't want to hit the panic button with the Chiefs because, they're the Chiefs. And again, you look at the track record. But as the season went along, and they did have a middle part in the season where they were playing good football. They beat the Lions on Sunday Night Football, and they were playing well. Mahomes played well. And it looked like they were starting to trend back up. But then they lost to the Bills, and then they kind of just, I think they've now lost 5 of their last 6. It just, season took a tailspin. And, yeah, no, they're not going to be in the postseason. So it's going to be a new team coming out of the AFC. We saw Joe Burrow and Tom Brady knock off Mahomes in the postseason prior to the Super Bowl, but now it's going to be something else. It's wide open. There's parity this year, and I love that. I obviously there are teams you have in mind with who you think could go to the Super Bowl, but there's no clear-cut favorite. I do think that every team can be beat. I really do believe that. I mean, the Chiefs last year could have been beaten, but it's just they didn't. They didn't get beaten. I mean, there were better Chiefs teams that have made it to the Super Bowl, obviously, than last year's. Obviously, because the ones that won. So yeah, but it's just it's unfortunate, what happened with Mahomes. I know the Chiefs fatigue and people getting annoyed with him and some things that don't even have to do with him. And I know a couple years ago when he complained about the offensive offsides, that kind of turned a lot of people off. But Patrick Mahomes is the face of the NFL. And right now he is the best quarterback in the NFL. And to see a marquee player like that go down, and he's a guy he plays all the time. The only time he, missed time due to an injury was when that game in Denver in 2019 when he dislocated his kneecap. But then he came back a couple weeks later. And that was the first Super Bowl run for them. His first Super Bowl championship, 2019. But other than that, guy plays all the time. Plays all the time. Plays through injuries. I mean, look at 2022. Suffered that high ankle sprain against the Jaguars. He got taken out of the game, and Chad Henne came in, and played a little bit for him. Then he came back in, and then he played through it in the championship game against the Bengals and in the Super Bowl against the Eagles. He's tough. He guts it out. But this was an injury. You can't do that. I know Phillip Rivers, who we'll talk about, he played in a championship game with a torn ACL, but for the most part, you don't usually play through an injury like that. You don't. But yeah, it really is unfortunate. And I hope that he's back on the field 100% next year, and he goes out there and he plays well. And I expect him to do that. So it's just, again, I know there's a lot of Chiefs hate, Chiefs fatigue. I know the haters are all happy this week, but yeah, no, I mean we're gonna see something different this year, but I didn't want to see Patrick Mahomes getting hurt. I mean, the Chiefs, odds of them making the playoffs, I mean, it looked like they were going to lose the game anyways. And it didn't look like they were going to make the playoffs, even if he was able to complete that game. So, but didn't want to see Patrick Mahomes go down like that. So, but you know what? He'll be back. And what's funny is, so this was his 9th season, which I can't even believe that's the case, how fast it's gone. So Tom Brady suffered the same injury in his ninth season. And that was back in week 1 of I think it was the 2008 season. He tore his ACL. And then look, there was a gap. Tom Brady went 10 plus years, right? He went 10 years without winning a Super Bowl. 10 years. And then, that streak ended in 2014 against the Seahawks. I don't think it's going to be a 10-year gap. And maybe it is. Like I said, I think there's more Super Bowls in Mahomes' future. But yeah, maybe it could be a little bit before he gets back there again. But I do think he's going to win some more. I really do believe that. But yeah, that is a weird coincidence that him and Brady tearing their ACLs in their ninth season. But yeah, Tom Brady was another guy. He played through everything. He never missed time, other than when he was suspended for Deflategate. But he played all the time. So yeah, the Chiefs, end of an era. But I also wanted to bring this up too, is Travis Kelce talking about the injury on his podcast. And if you read the quote, or if you listen to the podcast, when he talks about Mahomes coming back next year, rather than saying he says the Chiefs will be expecting him back, or however he said it. I don't have the exact quote in front of me. But he didn't say we. So that has a lot of people thinking that this is going to be it for Travis Kelce. And I said after last year, I was like, yeah, I think this is it. But I thought Kelce, at times, he's not the same player. But I thought he at least looked better than what I thought he was going to look like. He was getting, he was scoring touchdowns this year. Still making some big plays here and there. But, that Texans game, couldn't hold on to the ball that led to an interception. Yeah, this could be it for him. This might be it for him. And it's going to be different. Mahomes not having that security blanket in Kelce. If this is truly it. Because maybe he is coming back. But how he worded that, it seems like this could be it. But Andy Reid's not going anywhere, so you're still going to have him. And you'll still have Spagnuolo. So, yeah, it might be a little bit, like I said, before the Chiefs get back, but they're going to be back. They're going to be back at some point. So, but it's a good time for some of these teams that, get eliminated every year by the Chiefs to take advantage of it. And we saw some good games. We saw a great game between the Patriots and the Bills. But before I say that, okay, so where I am, I got to watch the Giants and the Jets. Now, what I've been doing is I'll have at least one game on and then have Red Zone on. But that was a great game, okay? And I had to sit through watch it. Now, of course, I saw the highlights on that on Red Zone, but I don't want to watch the Giants or the Jets. I want to watch that game. But I'd have to get the Sunday ticket, which I didn't buy this year. So it's just and the Giants and the Jets. I mean, this was one of the worst weeks for them. The Giants. They at least lost by 8 points, but the defense was a no-show. Talk about a no-show. The Jets' defense was a no-show either. I mean, Trevor Lawrence had arguably his best game ever against the Jets. A career day for him. 5 touchdowns. I mean, I didn't want to watch those games. But I had the Giant game on, so I was paying attention to that. But, obviously when Red Zone would put on the Patriots game, I got to see, the big plays. But what a game, though. I mean, earlier in the season, Patriots go into Buffalo. They upset the Bills. And then the Patriots have just, all they've been doing is winning games. And, the Bills have kind of struggled a little bit. But they've kind of gotten hot as of late. And they were down 21-0 against the Patriots. 21-0. And you had Patriot fans posting on social media like the dynasty's back. The Bills, this is it. Their window's closed. And then the Bills said, not so fast. Josh Allen, unbelievable in this game. There was a controversy with that catch by Shakir. There was a penalty flag for pass interference. But yeah, Josh Allen in that offense. James Cook making plays. And where I really want to give credit to is the Bills' defense. I mean, they really stepped up in the second half. I mean, Travion Henderson ran all over them, especially, even after the Bills took the lead. They were up, what were they, up 24 to... The Travion Henderson touchdown, I think, put them up 24 to 21. After the Bill, actually, no. No, it was 28. I gotta go back and look. But that Travion Henderson touchdown that gave the Patriots the lead again after the Bills took the lead for the first time all day. Other than that, the Bills defense stepped up in the second half. They got after Drake May. They made plays. And they got the key stops when they needed to, especially at the end of the game. And look, I still think the Patriots are probably still going to win the division. And the funny thing is, nobody's clinched the division yet. Nobody. Every division is still up for grabs. Now, that's going to change after this week in some cases. But, yeah, no, I mean, it's amazing that's been the case. So the Bills went up 28-24. That's what it was. And then on the ensuing drive, the following drive for the Patriots, they took the lead. Travion Henderson, 65-yard touchdown. He cut back, and Drake May was following him all the way down the field. It was a blocker for him. Travion Henderson has some breakaway speed, and he's going to be quite the player for them going forward. But then the Bills, they took the lead back. They went up 35-31, and that was the final score. A great game. In inclement weather, Josh Allen, 3 more touchdowns. James Cook, a couple of touchdown runs for him. The Patriots ran the ball for 246 rushing yards. Drake May had a couple of rushing touchdowns. So, the Bills are going to want to clean that up. And Drake May didn't, really throw the ball well through the air. I mean, he didn't really have to because, the Patriots ran the ball so well. He did throw a pick in this game. But that was a big win for the Bills. And everybody's saying this has got to be the year that the Bills do it. There's no Chiefs. There might be no Lamar Jackson. This is the year. Yeah, but there are some things with this Bills team that I don't really like, particularly the defense. I mean, the defense did step up when it had to, but is it going to be able to do that in January? Because I know Josh Allen's going to show up in January. He always does. But could it be another game in January where he's, on the losing end, another high-scoring game against somebody? Because I love how Bo Nix and that Broncos offense played on Sunday. Like, if Buffalo has to go there, that could be a problem. And the Broncos have a good defense, And what if, what if the Texans with C.J. Stroud, they see them again? I mean, I don't know. I mean, it would have to. Well, both teams are wild card teams, so I think the only chance they're going to meet each other is probably the championship game, if that happens. And I told you guys last week, I think the Texans could be a team that goes to the Super Bowl because of that defense. Now, it's going to come down to C.J. Stroud and playing clean football, but that defense is lethal. But yeah, can the Bills get to the Super Bowl? Absolutely they can. It's going to be on the back of Josh Allen, but that defense is going to have to play better. It's going to have to. You can't be giving up 246 rushing yards. Can't do that. Most of the time, you're going to lose those games. But that Patriots defense, listen, it's vulnerable. It's a solid defense, but it's not the 85 Bears. All right, teams can move the ball against this defense, and Josh Allen showed you that. So, I think that was that was good for the Patriots to lose this game because at least that shows like, hey, we're human. Okay, we needed that reality check. But they're a good Patriots team. This is a good Patriots team. Again, I said before the year started, I thought they were a year away. No, they're here now. And I give all the credit in the world to Mike Vrabel. Drake Mays played really well this year. So, That was a great game. That was a fun game. Wish I could have watched all of it, but like I said, I had to watch the Giants, and I had, like I said, I had Red Zone on, so I was able to still kind of pay attention to it. Let's see. All right, so the other thing too is Phillip Rivers. Um, it was upsetting, and actually they had a replay of it just now. I was watching that of that game, so I was watching the end of it, and I took the Seahawks with the points because I'm like, quarterback who hasn't played in 4 years. He's coming back in against a really good defense, and Sam Darnold's played well this year. I mean, I know it's a big number, but I don't know about that. I don't know if I could take it. Should have, but of course it's easier to say that now. Look, Rivers, for what it's worth, for a guy that hasn't played an NFL game in 4 years, he played fine. He did what he was supposed to do. Okay, a lot of it was handoffs. It was, some short passes, some wide receiver screens. I thought his best throw of the day was to Alec Pierce on the drive that led to the field goal that put them up 16-15. That was his best throw of the day. He did throw a touchdown pass to Josh Downs. Colts got down in the red zone there, but and the Colts defense played really well. Because this Seattle offense, I mean, we saw, we've seen it on Sunday night against the Commanders. The Commanders are not a good team, even though they beat the Giants. Darnold has had some really good games this year. Sunday was not his best game. He struggled against the Colts. And the Colts came very close to winning the game. And they're still alive. They still have a chance to make the playoffs. But it took another hit losing that game because they could have. But it's just it's hard to criticize Rivers and the situation because were you really expecting Rivers to go out there and throw for 330 and 3 touchdowns? No, that wasn't happening. It was not happening. The Colts had to be perfect in all 3 phases. Well, more so on defense because you give up touchdowns. I mean, and the Colts held the Seahawks to 6 field goals. They kept them out of the end zone. It's just, and they could have got the stop at the end, but they couldn't. And, you had Blake Grupe hitting a 60-yard field goal, and then Jason Myers, I believe, hit a 56-yard field goal, and he's had a great year for the Seahawks. It came down to the special teams and field position, and the Colts came up short. And I wanted to see Rivers go out there and win the game. And he was emotional after the game, and it's going to be interesting what happens these next 3 games. And I think, I mean, it doesn't get any easier. I mean, the competition he's going up against, you play Jacksonville again, the Colts do. They play San Francisco on Monday night. And then, you got the Texans the final week of the season in Houston. They still could lose out. There is a big part of me that wants to see the Colts make the playoffs with Rivers, and they could still do it. But it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough. I mean, look, if the Colts defense could play like that, and maybe their offense can generate more than just field goals. Again, they did score a touchdown, maybe, but it's just they're limited with Rivers. They are. Now, that's not to say, I mean, he literally just got there. He had, not that many days to, I mean, he knows the playbook, but not many days to practice and whatnot. Now you got a full week. This 49ers defense, again, give him all the credit in the world, Robert Saleh, with all the injuries, but this is not the 49ers defense we're accustomed to seeing. You can move the ball against this defense. The Titans proved that this past Sunday. There's no reason why this offense can't, and they could lean on Jonathan Taylor. Jonathan Taylor, I think, could have a big game on Monday. So that'll definitely help Rivers out. And, if the Colts defense, again, this 49ers offense, Purdy's looked good since he's come back outside of that game that he threw 3 picks, which he didn't because I needed him to not do that. for fantasy and my, being selfish here, but it's a winnable game on Monday. All right, and Rivers, look, he turned the ball over at the end of the game when you're trying to, throw up a prayer. Other than that, did what he was supposed to do. Did show that he's, a guy that's been out of the league for 5 years. It was that point where he slipped and he got back up and, basically he still took the sack, but I mean, for what he did, he was a game manager. And the Colts had an opportunity to win that game. And I think if you had Riley Leonard out there, it could have been another, and he did play okay against Jacksonville, but it could have been another Max Brosmer situation where you just had no chance. With Rivers, he's from an era where, and that's why there's a lot of people talking about this too. He's from an era where the quarterbacks know how to read defenses, and he knows the playbook. He wasn't going to put the ball in harm's way until the end of the game, where he had to. He had no choice. But now we're at a point in the NFL where there's a lot of people questioning the development of these young quarterbacks, and Tom Brady has brought it up. Tom Brady's brought it up, that these guys are not being taught how to read defenses. They just go in, you're talented, just use your talent, your ability to, just throw on the run and you'll be fine. No, you got to be able to read defenses. And that's why give me the 2010 quarterbacks, give me that era over this current era. Seriously. Well, there's certain quarterbacks right now from this era that could have played in that era, But listen, I give Rivers all the credit in the world. I mean, he didn't embarrass himself other than that when he slipped. And we got 3 more games of it. So, I hope he goes out there and plays well, and I hope the Colts find the way to make the playoffs. Because it still is quite a story. It's just, it for me, I wanted to see him win. Because it would be incredible. And, the Seahawks would be embarrassed, like losing to a QB that, again, they're going up against, like, Seattle's offense is going up against the Colts defense. It's not like quarterbacks are going against each other, but Seattle losing to Phillip Rivers after being out of the game for 5 years, I'd be embarrassed. But they didn't lose. They got the win. That was a big win for them, and that sets up a big Thursday night game between the Rams and the Seahawks. That's a great game. That likely decides the division right there. And it's similar to last year with the Lions and the Vikings, although that was played the final game of the regular season, where one team could be the number 1 seed and the other team could be a wild card team, the 5th seed. Could happen. So, and they played a close game the last time they met. So we'll see what happens on Thursday, but that's going to be a great game. Speaking of the Rams, they won again, 41-34 over the Lions. They were down 10, but they outscored the Lions 24-10 in the second half. Matthew Stafford, another great game. Did throw a pick. Actually threw a pick to Aiden Hutchinson. He read the play. It was going to be like a tight end screen, but Aiden Hutchinson ran that, picked it off. Got contributions from both running backs again. 2 touchdowns for Kyron Williams, touchdown from Blake Corum. Puka Nacua, big game. Colby Parkinson, 2 touchdowns. One of them, I don't know how it was a touchdown because, and after the whole week of talking about Isaiah Likely and how that should have been a touchdown, Colby Parkinson catches the ball. His knee is down before he even crosses the plane. I'm pretty sure he was touched, and they ruled it a touchdown. I didn't understand that, but that ended up being a touchdown. He had another one later in the game, which was big. Devontae Adams actually got hurt, hamstring, but same injury. It's been bothering him for some time, and he was on a deep route, and he ended up pulling up and falling down, and I thought that was it. But he hasn't been officially ruled out yet, but it's week to week. So I don't think he's playing tomorrow. So it's going to be... And Puka Nacua ended up leaving this game at one point, too, but he came back in, thankfully. But yeah, so it looks like there's going to be no Devontae Adams, so other guys are going to have to step up. But yeah, I mean, this was a back and forth game, fun game. Jared Goff had a good game, 3 more touchdowns for him. Rams did a good job at limiting Jahmyr Gibbs, but they couldn't stop Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jameson Williams. St. Brown, 13 catches for 164 yards and 2 touchdowns. Jameson Williams at 7 for 134 and a touchdown. I mean, this Lions defense just couldn't get any stops. The Rams were moving the ball up and down the field after they were down. And then the Lions offense kind of stalled a little bit. Again, they lose 41-34. They're on the outside looking in, so they basically have to win out and get a little bit of help. So, but they're not done yet. But yeah, this defense just, I mean, it's similar to last year. You're dealing with injuries and, it's kind of a little bit too much to overcome. The offense has to basically be perfect. And, it almost was, but like I said, they kind of stalled a little bit. And the Rams kind of took control of the game, and that was it. So the Lions might miss the playoffs. So, and yeah, no, I mean, they still got a chance, obviously, but it's they're kind of in a tough spot right now. So, yeah, so they dropped to 8-6. They'll be taking on the Steelers next week. And speaking of the Pittsburgh Steelers, everybody's making noise about them because they won 28-15 over the Dolphins. And Aaron Rodgers played well. The defense played well without T.J. Watt. Got a couple of, one turnover, 1 interception off of Tua. Asante Samuel Jr., who the Steelers picked up and activated him. He got an interception. Marquez Valdez-Scantling, he scored a touchdown. That was like the Green Bay days all over again. Rodgers made some good throws in this game. In the beginning of the game, it was tough. The Steelers were struggling a bit. Rodgers was getting sacked. Dolphins defense was flying around. The defensive backs were getting to the guys, getting to the Steelers players immediately and tackling them down, not giving up any big gains, nothing. But then the Steelers started to get hot, and they started to move the ball. They started to run. They were running the football effectively. Kenneth Gainwell and Jaylen Warren. I mean, it looked like Jaylen Warren was going to explode for like a big run, but got tripped up a couple times. But yeah, both of them looked good. Rodgers, there were some good throws in this game. He still has some zip on that ball when he throws it. To Valdez-Scantling for the touchdown, like I said. He hit earlier in the game, he hit DK Metcalf in the middle of the field. That was a good throw. That was a vintage Rodgers throw. And then, later in the game, to Metcalf again for the touchdown. I thought that was going to get picked off. It looked like it was going to get picked off. It looked like the defensive back, he did try to jump the route, but Rodgers fitted in there. DK made the catch, stiff-armed the man, and he got into the end zone for a touchdown. And the Steelers win. And now everybody's talking about the Steelers, and hey, they can make a deep run. Look at them. If they could play like that. Look, as somebody that wants to see Aaron Rodgers go out on top, I want to pump the brakes a little bit, because right now if the Steelers are in a good spot, especially after winning that game against the Ravens, and now you won here. I want to pump the brakes because the Steelers, if they do make the playoffs, they're going to have to either play the Bills again, the Chargers, or the Texans. Okay? Chargers and Texans both have very good defenses. All right? And then you just play Josh Allen. Now, the Bills struggled in the first half, but then Josh Allen got it rolling, and the Bills ran the ball for over 200 yards, I think, again against the Steelers. So those are 3 tough opponents. Now, the Steelers will be at home, whereas in years past, they've had to go on the road. So that gives them a chance. And Aaron Rodgers, if he's going to play like that, they got a chance. If the defense plays like how it did, because they shut down the running game. I thought Devon Achane was going to have a big game in the early going, but then the Steelers kind of, settled in. Once they started falling behind, then, the Dolphins basically had to throw it. Troy Aikman was not happy with how the Dolphins were handling, the final quarter, because they started putting up points, but they weren't running hurry up. They were kind of taking their time, and, you wonder if maybe if they would have if they would have showed some more urgency, and because they started to move the ball a little bit, maybe they had a chance. But I mean, you're down 28-3. Not many teams come back from that. Sorry, Falcons. But yeah, the Steelers were in full control of this game once they took the lead. Because the Dolphins did have a 3-0 lead, but the Steelers, once they scored that first touchdown, it was a Connor Hayward rushing touchdown. Also, Jonnu Smith had a rushing touchdown in this game too. He wanted to score against his former team. The Steelers, look, after what we saw against Buffalo a couple weeks ago, and the fans are booing Renegade and chanting Fire Tomlin, and Rodgers with the bloody nose getting sacked by Joey Bosa, losing the ball, and the Bills scoring a touchdown off of that, I thought the Steelers were done. But what did Mike Tomlin say after the game against the Bills? He said, keep watching. And we keep on watching. And now they've won against the Ravens, and now they've won against the Dolphins. So, and the offenses looked good. And, we've seen Rodgers with the discount double check, and, he's throwing the deep ball, and, some of his throws have looked like vintage Rodgers, like I said. And, they played some good complementary football. And if that can continue, they could be a dangerous team. So, but I'm not going to get too caught up in it, because I still think that whoever they play against in the first round of the playoffs, if they do get there, it's going to be a very tough game, and they're going to be the underdogs. But hey, you know what? Aaron Rodgers and Mike Tomlin are very experienced in January. I know they've, have lost more than they've won now. I mean, they both have won Super Bowls. And this team is a veteran team. They could still get it done. They could. I don't know. I'm not going to say they will. But, you got these veterans now. You bring in MVS, you bring in Thielen, and Thielen was getting praised for, some of his blocking on social media. These veteran guys, they've been around the game. They know what to do. And Rodgers and MVS have that chemistry. So, and Darnell Washington is a monster. I mean, that guy is hard to bring down. I'd still like to see them get Freiermuth more involved. I want to see him get more involved, because he could be a real weapon for them. So, I like what I saw. It was nice to see that. I'm going to appreciate it as much as long as it keeps going. Because I don't know, because it can end. It's coming to an end. And everybody was coming up to Rodgers. Joe Barry, who used to be on the Packers, went up to him and called him the greatest of all time after the game. And I forgot about Zach Wilson being on the Dolphins, but Zach Wilson and Aaron Rodgers had an exchange when he was being interviewed by Lisa Salters. Rasul Douglas came over to him. So, and Rodgers was in a good mood, and that's what happens. When you lose games, you're not in a good mood. When you win games, you are in a good mood. And, Rodgers talked about, some of the guys that kind of, he called them, castaways, and, they were let go by teams, and, teams gave up on them. But, the Steelers brought in some guys, brought those guys in, and they've played well, like Kenneth Gainwell, Asante Samuel, MVS, So, yeah, look, it's a different Steelers team than what we've seen the last couple years, because Rodgers is the best quarterback they've had since Big Ben. And the bar is not really that high because of what they've had. But, look, you give Rodgers time to throw. The protection got better as the game went along. He could still sling that rock. And if you give him a running game, and the defense played well on Monday, but I think it was more of just, Tua not playing well and not being able to play in the cold. Dolphins still can't win in the cold. They could be a problem. But I look at some of these other teams, and I just don't think the Steelers stack up well against these teams. So, but hey, they could surprise us. Like I said, after the Bills loss, you thought it was over. I thought it was over. But then they turn around and they beat the Ravens. So it's not over yet. They got the Lions this week, and that's a vulnerable defense. I think Rodgers and that offense could take advantage of it. It's just you're going to have to put up points with that offense. And Jamison Williams and Amon-Ra St. Brown. So, yeah, and Jahmyr Gibbs. That's going to be a problem. So we'll see what happens there. But since we're on the topic of the Dolphins, okay, Tua benched last 3 games. Quinn Ewers is going to take over, and he's going to be the emergency quarterback. He's QB3. That's it for Tua. He's done with the Dolphins, and I think that's the right move. It's unfortunate for him, but he has not played up to expectations. He has not played up to that contract, especially. That was a big mistake giving him that contract. And they're going to do what the Broncos did to Russell Wilson. Cut ties with him, move on, and they're going to have to figure out that quarterback position. So it's just, it's time. It's time. So, I mean, hopefully Tua could get, I mean, again, it's nothing set in stone, but hopefully Tua can get off his feet and, maybe he finds another spot and, could try to revitalize his career. But, yeah, I mean, even then, I'm not really that optimistic about it. I still, he can win you games, but he's just not a starting quarterback. He's not. He could be a backup. That's how I look at him. So, yeah. There's that. And we'll do a quick little whip around with all of the rest of the games. So, yeah, the Giants 29-21 losing to the Commanders. Actually, didn't even talk about the Broncos and the Packers. We'll talk about that. That was a great game. Broncos won 34-26. Michael Parsons, though, goes down late in the game, torn ACL, so he's out. That is a huge blow to the Packers. Injury bug just keeps killing them. They already lost Tucker Kraft. Now you lose Micah Parsons on defense, who's been great. And now they're basically the same team they were last year, and that just really hurts their chances of making a deep playoff run, in my opinion. Jordan Love had a couple of turnovers, but I think I said this earlier in the pod. This was the best game I've seen Bo Nix play all year. I mean, he looked locked in. Was making the throws. I think he had 4 touchdown passes in this game. If you get that Bo Nix in January with that defense, they're going to be tough to beat. They're going to be really tough to beat in the AFC. Because the Broncos' offense has been so frustrating to watch all year. Well, it wasn't frustrating here. The Broncos were really good offensively here. And it was against a tough defense, too. This wasn't against soft competition. So that's encouraging going forward for the Broncos. But, yeah, back to the Packers, though. That Micah Parsons injury is a killer. And, look, they're still a good team even without Micah Parsons. But, when they got Micah Parsons, then they were looked at as Super Bowl contenders. Well, I don't think they're that anymore with him being out. But, yeah, Broncos pick up the win, 12-2. Looks, I think they're going to end up getting the 1 seed. I know the Patriots are 1 game back, but I think Broncos are going to end up with that. Caleb Williams and the Bears, 31-3 over the Browns. Made some incredible throws. That 1 touchdown pass to DJ Moore was a highlight. That could be like a top 20 play when they come out with the top 100 plays in the NFL this year. The Ravens blanked the Bengals 24-0. Yeah, that was a tough scene for the Bengals. 4-10 now on the year. Texans all over the Cardinals, 40-20. We talked a little bit about the Jaguars, 48-20 over the Jets. Eagles get back on track. They win 31-0 over the Raiders. I mean, the Raiders just... And they play the Giants in a couple weeks. We'll see how that game goes down. Panthers could have took over the NFC South. They end up losing 20-17 to the Saints. Saints have now swept the season series. I mean, give the Saints credit, though. They're fighting. And, Tyler Shuck has not looked that bad. So, yeah, Panthers dropped to 7-7. And they play the Bucs this week, so that's a big game. Niners win 37-24 over the Titans. They're now 10-4. They're going to make the postseason. Interested to see how that team looks in the postseason now, because they're not as loaded as they have been in years past. J.J. McCarthy, 3 more touchdowns. He had a rushing touchdown, had a couple of touchdowns, made a nice throw. He made some good throws in this game, and he could air it out a little bit. He aired it out to Addison at one point during the game. Hit Jalen Naylor for a couple of touchdowns. Made some good throws. I mean, Dallas' defense is not that good, but listen, look at how J.J. McCarthy was, when he first came back from injury. Last 2 weeks, he's played better. So, I mean, that's encouraging. Still not on the same page as Justin Jefferson, but that'll come around. You would hope it would if he's going to be the guy going forward. But, yeah, Dallas' playoff hopes are basically done after that loss. But yeah, that's week 15 in the NFL. 3 more weeks left. It's gonna be fun. Nothing set in, for the most part. Nothing set in stone yet. With divisions and the wild card race is gonna be exciting. We'll make sure to cover it as we go along here. But thank you guys for watching. As always, everyone, make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe to the video, to the channel. Make sure to follow us on the social media platforms in the description below, and wherever you get your podcasts, you can listen to us as well. Just look up Infinite Sports. You'll find us there. And until next time, I'm Kenneth Grunfelder signing off. Have a good one, and I'll talk to you guys next time. Take care.